All right, welcome in. My name is Andy Lack. This is the 2026 Houston Open betting and DFS preview. Thank you for stopping by. This is a great golf course we have on hand this week, designed by one of my favorite modern architects. And there's been some very interesting stuff in the data for us to talk about once this event got moved from the fall to the spring. Firstly, wanted to give a quick shout to the podcast that I just did with my friend Zico, the founder of Course Vaults. He is building a golf course rating app. You can find out all about it on the podcast that we just did on this podcast feed. It's on YouTube as well. He's become a great friend, really smart guy. If you like playing different golf courses and rating them and thinking about them and listening to what other people have to say about them, making lists, this is the app for you. We said it on the podcast, but kind of think of it as like a letterbox of golf courses. If you're familiar with Letterbox, the movie app, it's become this very super popular app where people will rate movies that they see, interact with other people through their shared love of movies. And what Zico is trying to do is basically that for golf courses. And, I think it's really helpful if you're traveling, trying to plan a golf trip, trying to figure out what golf courses to play for a bachelor party trip or vacation. So go download the app and start rating courses. My username is ADP Lack, by the way, if you want to check out some of my reviews. Okay. Quickly on the Valspar, because I want to talk about the Masters a little bit too at the end. I don't have a ton. It's been pretty spectacular weather here in Los Angeles. We're in a bit of a heat wave, which I actually like. So I've been out on the golf course a lot. Not to mention we've had March Madness. I did watch most of today at the Valspar, however, and it's basically Fitzpatrick or bust for me. DFS, not a very good week for me. I got killed by the 8K range. I was really heavy on the likes of JJ Spawn, Sahith Theegala, Wyndham Clark, Nick Taylor. When like an 8K heavy, kind of that group of those players in the 8K range, those mid-tier players in the 8K range, all those guys missed the cut. My core was Spieth, who played well, I guess. He's like T17 heading into the final round. Brooks, good, I guess. He could be a lot better than I think the T12-ish position that he is heading into Sunday. So those two are fine. But Nick Taylor and Wyndham Clark, very bad. I did play Sung Jae. I liked him quite a bit in DFS heading into the weekend. Never thought that he would be heading into the week, excuse me. I never thought that he would be in this position. But playing Sung Jae in DFS, doesn't really help when, even Sung Jae, Brooks, Spieth lineup, they're not going to go anywhere or do anything when they're 3 or 4 of 6s. So kind of a frustrating week for me in DFS. Just really misread those guys in the 8K range. So really my only rooting interest this weekend, I've got a couple of good matchups, big ones on Brooks over Keegan and Fitz over Bridgman, but it's really just Fitz outright that is going to determine my week, which I know is a very popular bet in the Discord, and it would really be great to get 2 in a row here after Cam at the Players to get back in the green in the outright section. Because I started the year pretty cold on the outright front. The way that I bet for me to break even, I need to hit an outright once every 7 weeks. And I was 0 for 8 to start the season. Then I hit Cam Young in the 9th week of the season. And so if I hit Fitz to go 2 for 10, I would now in 2 weeks go from being quite behind schedule to ahead of schedule and in the green again. Um, Cam on his own got me back close to even, but I still need to hit one of my next 5. Um, and Fitz would be a great one. He's a guy I've been on relentlessly. Bet him at Riviera, bet him at API, didn't bet him at the Players. He was in my core in DFS that week at the Players. I bet him again this week, obviously at Valspar. So he's kind of really been prominently featured for me in his last 4 starts here. And he continues to lap the field and tee to green this week. He's hitting the piss out of his irons. He's been the best ball striker in the field by 2 strokes. And he's finally starting to make some clutch putts today that hopefully gave him some confidence. He had a couple big ones to keep the round going for par on the back 9, couple for birdie as well. On 11 and 12. So, I mean, he is the highest skilled player on this leaderboard with a real chance to win. Data Golf gives him a little bit over a 20% chance. Although that Sungjae birdie on 18 hurt his implied win probability quite a bit. So, you know, famous last words, but I can't say I have a lot of fear in Brandt Snedeker or David Lipsky. I think Penge is a real threat, and obviously it's in Sungjae's hands. So, you know, if Sungjae goes out and shoots 2 or 3 under tomorrow, he's winning the tournament. I would say the tournament probably gets won at 12 or 13 under par. So if Sungjae shoots 2 under par and gets to 13, that puts Fitzpatrick in a situation where he has to shoot 5 under tomorrow. And there hasn't been that many 5 unders out there. He did that in the play. I think he shot 4 under to 1 back of the playoff at the Players, and that's what he would likely need to do again tomorrow. Is shoot 4 or 5 under, or Sungjae doesn't play well. And I also think there's a decent chance that this tournament gets won at 11 under par, and Fitz only has to shoot 3 under. I think that's not likely, but in play, hopefully. So hopefully some of that competitive rush catches up with Sungjae, and Fitz can save the day for us. All right, let's talk about Houston. So we are headed to Memorial Park this week for the Houston Children's Open. I know the sponsors moved around. It was Vivint for a little bit. But anyway, Minwoo Lee won this tournament last year at 20 under par over Gary Woodland and Scottie Scheffler, 19 under. Lee was 35 to 1. And the scoring average was minus 1.3. More on that in a little bit. The prior year, Stefan Jaeger, 12 under par over Tony Finau, Thomas Dietrich, Alejandro Tosti, Scottie Scheffler, and Taylor Moore at 11 under par. Had Jaeger that week at 50 to 1. That was a phenomenal week. And the prior 3 years, it was in November. It was in the fall swing. So Tony Finau, Jason Kokrak, Carlos Ortiz played well over a half stroke over par those 3 years. And we'll talk about how the golf course has changed quite a bit when it is played in March versus fall. But as it stands now, Memorial Park in Houston, Texas, the architect was originally John Bredemus in 1936. Tom Doak came in 2019, gave the golf course a major facelift for the better, I think I would say. I think most would say. Par 70 measuring 7,475 yards, pretty long golf course for a par 70. The fairways are perennial ryegrass overseed measuring 30 to 40 yards wide. The greens are Poa Trivialis overseed measuring 7,000 square feet on average. And the rough is perennial ryegrass overseed. Basically, it's like inch of rough, inch and a quarter of rough. There's only 24 bunkers on the golf course. Water only comes into play on 4 holes. The superintendent here, Parker Henry, was formerly at Quail Hollow, which is one of my favorite comps of the week to look at from a required skill set standpoint. And there was no measurable rainfall on November 1st, from November 1st until January 21st, which added some difficulty to the overseed process. Recently, however, it has been more warm, dry. That has certainly helped the underlying Bermuda grass, but it's made it difficult to manage the moisture to keep some of that ryegrass healthy, at least reported on by the GCSA sheet. So going to be interesting to keep an eye if some of that creeping Bermuda pops up, like we saw a touch at TPC Sawgrass, but I will defer to. I have a good buddy that is caddying for Cole Hammer this week on the bag, so I'll kind of get his input closer to the week progresses of how some of the nuances of the golf course is playing. Ahead of the 2025 event, they added a new back tee on 16 and 17 green, was moved 30 yards farther back. Starting in 2024, the golf course was overseeded and the tournament was moved to March. That's kind of the big change that you're going to hear all about, and we're going to talk about mainly on this podcast. This was part of, I guess I would say, the Augustification of this golf course, as this tournament is now just 2 weeks before the Masters. Tournament organizers have really seemed to make an effort to make this golf course look, feel, and play more like Augusta National. This included trimming down the rough, overseeding the fairways and greens, essentially eliminating any missed fairway penalty and turning this into a real distance over accuracy golf course. Fortunately, Memorial Park already had some bones that I think were quite similar to Augusta in terms of like the large undulating greens designed obviously by the great Tom Doak, who will be the first to tell you that Alistair McKenzie has been a big influence for him over the years. And when you add in that type of undulation on these large greens, as well as a lot of short grass around the greens instead of that thick rough and bunkering, you're going to get a lot more of that look and feel like Augusta National that so many people are familiar with. And in the last 2 years, when the golf course has played to a scoring average of minus 0.6, that's been quite a bit easier than it was in the fall when it played to an average of plus 0.7. So it's kind of really been a tale of two different golf courses. And, for my modeling purposes, I would definitely focus the majority of my attention on the last 2 years. Now, haven't been to Houston, haven't played this golf course. It's pretty hard for me to say which version of Memorial Park is better, which I prefer. I think there were some really cool things about the way that it played in November. It was obviously a little bit harder. Felt like it was certainly at least firmer than last year when they got a ton of rain. The even kind of that short Bermuda rough that they had created enough of a missed fairway penalty that it wasn't this like can spray the ball anywhere distance over accuracy golf course. And as well, the more of the Bermuda rough that was a little bit around the greens also made chipping kind of a different equation at Memorial Park versus chipping off that overseed. When you take the grain out of it, it's going to make chipping a lot easier. And we'll talk about how the stats have bared that out. On the other hand, I don't think it's a bad thing at all that the PGA Tour is attempting to prepare its players for major championships. In fact, there's another tour that has multiple great golfers with a real shot to win the Masters, Bryson, Rahm, Patrick Reed, etc., that are playing a golf course in South Africa that I would not say is does not check the preparatory box in the same way that Memorial Park would, if I'm trying to at least come close to simulating the type of around the green shots, the proximity buckets that I'm going to have to hit quite a bit, the driving conditions that I'm going to have to hit at Augusta. So while I think this was like a super fun, interesting, more difficult golf course when it was non-overseeded and playing in the fall, I think that this, in its current construction, is a pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's the greens aren't bent grass. These are phenomenal greens at Memorial Park. Some of the best greens on the PGA Tour. They're not Augusta's greens, but as far as PGA Tour courses go in its current construction, I think this is one of the better tests if you're trying to simulate those conditions at Augusta. And I think that the PGA Tour kind of leaning into that is sound. It's wise. I to be honest with you, I'm actually a little confused as to why more of the PGA Tour's better players aren't playing this week. And Valero, I know there are a lot of players that really like to play the week before the Masters. And there are some similarities, I suppose, in TPC San Antonio and Augusta, but not in the way of Memorial Park, where there's been like this real concerted effort to kind of Augustify this golf course as best they can. And I think it's awesome that we go. I think it's awesome that we go here. It Memorial Park, from everything I've heard, one of the best American examples of municipal golf. That municipal golf can be very good. It's inside Houston proper. It hosts over 60,000 rounds a year at a pretty affordable price, especially if you're a Houston resident. And in 2019, Tom Doak was hired by Houston Astros owner Jim Crane to, give this golf course a real facelift. And as I've mentioned earlier, Doak is arguably the best working modern architect. And, we don't get to see a lot of his work on the PGA Tour. He's been pretty on the record about the fact that he doesn't care all that much about designing championship golf courses. He prefers taking on really interesting pieces of land and designing golf courses that are fun, imaginative for all skill levels. It seems like Memorial Park does a really great job of this. So don't take weeks like this for granted. We very seldom get to watch professional golfers take on a golf course, which I think such creatively constructed greens. The softness of the golf course last year made it play obviously easier than I think anyone would hope for, but it does not look like it will be half as soggy as it was last year. As far as a couple things that Doak did to the golf course, he added far more movement to the fairways. Again, he really beefed up the green complexes, made them so much more provocative, like borderline avant-garde compared to the green complexes that they were before, which I think allowed the golf course to really shine. Particularly the fact that they're also surrounded quite a bit by short grass. There's not a lot of bunkers on this golf course. I think that really is additive to what makes this such a solid preparation for Augusta. Like I said, there's some characteristics about TPC San Antonio in terms of that's a golf course where short game matters, and middle to long iron play also correlates to success. But in terms of the actual types of shots, doesn't really hold a candle to the way that Memorial Park is being set up. So I'm excited for this week. Doak is kind of one of the few architects I think that really understands that it's far more interesting, at least in my opinion, to watch pros kind of chip off of short grass than it is watching them chip out of bunkers or thick rough. And generally, this is what allows players with a really great short game to flex their muscles and separate. It's also the main reason why around the green play has had such a strong predictive correlation with Augusta National. And this golf course, obviously a bit easier than Augusta, with a little bit of a higher greens and regulation percentage, but I would still have an above average weight on short game this week. Course only features 19 bunkers, and instead we kind of get these heavily sloping collection areas that I think are going to really inspire short game skill and creativity. We've already discussed the major differences between 2024 and 2025 versus 2021 through 2023. But let's put some numbers behind how much the golf course has changed with the move from March, or excuse me, with the move to March, and how the overseed has affected statistically the way that this golf course plays. So the off the tee difficulty went from 26th to 24th. The approach difficulty went from 16th to 29th. Here's the huge one. The around the green difficulty went from 9th hardest when it was in the fall to 29th out of 42nd hardest, 13th easiest. So way easier to gain strokes around the green, less randomness, less clustering together. Putting difficulty stayed about the same. Driving distance went up, a lot more driver heavy. Driver usage percentage went way up, 73% to 83% when you shaved down and overseeded that rough. And the missed fairway penalty, this is really the big one that is going to change how the golf course is going to play. Went from 29th out of 42nd. So not like a huge missed fairway penalty, but kind of just enough to keep you honest, to the lowest missed fairway penalty now on the PGA Tour, completely eliminated. A lower missed fairway penalty than at Augusta. At least at Augusta, you've got like the pine straw and the trees. This, over the last 2 years, has been the lowest missed fairway penalty on the PGA Tour. The rough penalty went from 18th out of 42nd to 40th out of 42nd. Again, barely any rough penalty whatsoever. And the rough proximity went from 53 feet to 45 feet. So far easier to play out of the rough. Around the green difficulty from the fairway, this kind of speaks to even the fact that from the fairway, when the fairways are overseeded versus grainy Bermuda, it's a lot easier to chip out of the fairway too. It went from 6th most difficult to 17th most difficult. And then around the green difficulty from the rough, huge one here, 13th most difficult to 36th most difficult, or rather 6th easiest. So overseeded rough, far easier to chip out of than non-overseeded Bermuda. But we also need to keep in mind that in the 2 years since the overseed, like 2025 last year played 1.2 strokes easier than 2024, which is mainly because last year, lot softer than in 2024. There's a lot more rain heading into that event than there was in 2024. Golf course was very receptive. There's less wind last year as well. And 2024, the Stefan Jaeger year, we really kind of were able to lean into driver short game, right? But once we got to 2025, when the golf course was a lot more receptive, higher greens and regulation percentage, more putting variance, it kind of became a little bit more driver putter than driver short game under those receptive conditions. And this week in Houston, not seeing a lot of rain in the forecast. Like right now, there doesn't look to be a ton of wind, but I would probably say that the scoring average probably falls somewhere between 2024 and 2025. It's early. I'd go with a -0.5 average for now. But we'll obviously update that when I speak to a couple more folks on ground. Steve, Twitterless Steve, will be back in action this week. So make sure to follow along in the Discord for updates on that. In terms of distance accuracy, both or neither, you can probably assume where we're going here. Long hitters over the last 2 years that it's been overseeded, plus 0.37 over their baseline, gain over a quarter stroke over their baseline for being a long hitter here. Short hitters lose a quarter stroke compared to their baseline. Accurate players lose minus 0.11. Inaccurate players, so if you're an inaccurate player compared to your baseline, you are 0.3 strokes better here. So kind of a bombers hit it anywhere paradise for a lot of these guys. I would still say that, like, because of how sloping these greens are, if they decide to put the pins in certain spots, angles do still matter here, like based on how well the golf course is designed. I know it feels silly to say that at the pro level where technology has like totally taken over the value of angles and a lot of the golf course architecture stuff, where it just, these guys have their ball on a string and it doesn't matter as much. But statistically speaking, there has really been like over a half stroke advantage over the last 2 years for being a long hitter versus a short hitter, which is really large. Inaccurate players are 0.3 strokes better, like we said, than their baseline. So kind of that puts some data behind the Chris Gotterup statement that you can really drive it anywhere here. The driver usage percentage, like I said, increased by over 10% in 2024. And every single player in the top 6 in 2024, well above average in distance. 2025, 7 of the top 8 were amongst some of the longest players on tour. Valimaki was kind of the lone exception, who, of course, made up for it with his long iron play. But the logic behind these numbers is that what happens to the missed fairway penalty when the rough is shaved down and overseeded, you get moderately wide fairways, and the missed fairway penalty, when that becomes the lowest on tour, as is the case with the rough penalty, and the fraction of penalty strokes also amongst the lowest on tour, you are just going to get like every kind of imaginable condition that you want if you are a longer player that is a little bit more inaccurate off the tee. This is kind of the conditions that you want to play under, right? So, and this golf course's accuracy off the tee is not going to be a big part of the calculus for me this week. Very significantly decreased in importance compared to the predictiveness of distance. It's still quite a long golf course, playing as a par 70 that can play past 7,400 yards. Doesn't always play that long. They mix up some of the tee boxes from day to day. Middle iron play, slightly above average. Long iron play is up to 32.6%. Maybe that number goes down a touch under less soft conditions this year, but still a very significant middle to long iron golf course. You want your middle to long iron players here as opposed to your wedge players here. And the greens and regulation percentage now is probably going to end up being right around middle of the pack. So when we put all of these numbers together and we square that away with the predictive chart, if we are looking at the predictive baseline compared to tour average, not a shock to see that driving distance gets a significant boost in predictiveness. Putting as well falls slightly above tour average, and then approaching around the green kind of falls slightly above tour average. The breakdown of off the tee, which is 31.9, that is broken down into 22.3% distance and 9.6% accuracy. So off the tee is going to be a lot more distance heavy here than accuracy. And if we look at how the leaderboard has actually moved, the variance decomposition over the last 2 years, the 2-year average off the tee, 12.4% compared to the tour average of 15.1%. Approach 32.4% compared to the tour average of 34.9. Around the green 16.8% compared to the tour average of 14.4%. Putting 38.4% compared to the tour average of 35.5%. So interestingly enough, despite the predictiveness of driving distance, off the tee is really barely moving that leaderboard compared to tour average, and it's really been short game and putting that are moving the leaderboard here more since the overseed. 2024, it was a lot more short game when the golf course played harder, and in 2025, when it played easier, putting really moved the leaderboard the most. So if we kind of apply those weights to our predictive baseline, off the tee goes down a little bit, approach goes down a little bit, and approach around the green and putting get a little bit of a boost. And it's kind of a similar story when you look at in-event correlations, a 2-year average. Like ball striking has been a little less sticky here relative to tour average compared to short game and putting at Memorial Park. So when you use kind of these multipliers, we come to weights of off the tee 24.6 compared to the average of 28.1%, approach 25.0% compared to the average of 32.0%, around the green 21.7. That's up considerably. And putting 28.7 compared to that average of 22.8. So what does this all mean, right? If kind of I'm coming to a conclusion about Memorial Park, it really, when it plays softer and easier, really turns into this distance and putting golf course. And given the fact that it now has very shaved down areas around the green, it's become a lot easier to move on the leaderboard and separate with around the green as well, kind of similar to Augusta in that way statistically. So kind of the easier that the golf course plays, the more that you're going to see putting move the leaderboard here, which is a lot more of what we got last year than in 2024 when Gary Woodland and Minwoo Lee last year ranked first and second in putting. Don't get it twisted. Approach still important here, particularly middle to long iron play, but actually compared to tour average, approach is actually statistically what's taking a lot of the hit that you see putting and around the green get from that overseed. And I think because of drier conditions this year, it's going to play about a half stroke harder than it did in 2025. So I'm giving a little bit more of a manual adjustment away from putting towards ball striking, but that's still giving us final weights of off the tee slightly below tour average, and very below average on accuracy, still above average on distance, but not so high to the point of distance to get the value of off the tee, even above tour average, because it's still a golf course where you can kind of drive it anywhere. And even the shorter and inaccurate players still at least have a shot due to the low missed fairway penalty. Approach 26% compared to the tour average of 32%. So approach takes a little bit of a hit compared to that increased importance of around the green and putting, which are still a little bit above tour average, even with a bit of a manual override there to get the approach and off the tee a little bit higher. The two externals, so kind of overall, like, I think if you look at putting and distance, you're going to be barking up the tree of what I think a lot of the field is going to do. I think the narrative here is going to be pretty distance heavy. And if you're looking for ways to get different, like the antidote to being a shorter player is always going to be long iron play, right? Like if you have a guy that drives the ball 300 yards off the tee and he is better from 200 yards than the guy who drives it 320 yards off the tee, and is not a great long iron player from 200 yards, it's obviously how you arrive, right? So, I'm not purely just like separating out with distance. I still think that long iron play can get the job done just as much as distance. And I think like in 2024, when it played a lot firmer and windy, and you saw this big spike in the importance of short game versus 2025, where it was a lot more soft and receptive, and you saw this big spike in putting. I kind of like split the difference there. I think putting's probably like a little bit more reliable to go with in terms of leaderboard movement. But this is a week where I do think if you have a very good short game, like I said, you'll have that ability to really flex your muscles on this golf course. Chipping off of short grass is kind of like it's a big part of Memorial Park, and Tom Doak comes from that more modernist school of golf architecture, where he kind of understands that short grass is going to enhance a lot of the creativity and shot making around the green. And despite this being still a challenging golf course on approach with the long irons, mainly because of its length, it's absolutely a golf course where putting skill really matters. And this is mainly a lot due to the fact that the proximity to the hole on this golf course is going to be higher because of all the long irons, and due to the amount of long iron approaches, that's going to increase the importance of lag putting skill. Not to mention with the copious amounts of short grass, players are also going to be able to putt from around the green in many cases on this golf course. So, if you don't have a great short game, you can also kind of make up for that if you're a good lag putter. You can still use that Texas wedge here. So, these are really, like, in my opinion, some of the best greens that players will encounter all season outside of Augusta. So, and that's just in terms of like the construction and internal contouring alone, and kind of explains why putting is going to need some significant weighting on this golf course from a projection standpoint. Players can solve a lot of problems this week with elite lag putting. We saw it big time last year with Minwoo Lee. In terms of the correlation of course history and comp courses, the overseed obviously dramatically changed the way the golf course played, but I would not throw the 3 years of the non-overseeded Houston Open out the window either. The holes they still look the same. The sight patterns remain the same visually. But the way that the golf ball interacts with the ground and the rough have obviously changed the way that certain skills are favored. Very low correlation of course history over a small sample size. Kokrak won first and only appearance. Minwoo Lee won on his first appearance. Valimaki finished fourth last year as a first-timer. Toasty finished second as a first-timer. Rory finished fifth as a first-timer. Billy Horschel, Gerard, Rose. All players who've showed up on first appearance and finished top 10. So, I don't think that I would put a copious weight on course history this week. I have alluded to obviously the Augustification of this course quite a bit on the pod, and outside of the Masters, it reminds me an awful lot of Quail Hollow, which is kind of this other bomber-friendly golf course with tons of short grass, large undulating green complexes, a tremendous amount of long par fours, long irons galore. I think if we do end up getting a little bit more rain, like obviously very different agronomically to Riviera, but like the importance of short game, kind of like some of the internal contours that you're going to see on the Riviera greens. I think they're a lot bolder in Houston. The greens are certainly larger, but like that kind of distance over accuracy, skill set, middle to long iron play, short game importance. Even this year with Riviera, like this year's Riviera, when it was softer, played a lot like Houston played in 2025. And my hope is that, we get somewhat firmer conditions, hopefully a little bit of wind this week, but, Quail Hollow, particularly Quail Hollow, even more so than Riviera, kind of like these bomber-friendly golf courses with enough short grass, large undulating green complexes, kind of a solid amount of longer par fours. Congaree, also like another Rory golf course that it's a real shame that Rory isn't playing this week. And I don't know if he needs an extra week off to heal from injury. I know he's been battling some back stuff. He's played Valero in the past. He has switched up his routine heading into the Masters many times. He played Memorial Park last year, and obviously that seemed to work out well. He finished fifth. There's been years where he played Valero. I don't know if he is just needs an extra week and is going to play Valero so he can get a little bit more rest this week, or he's not going to play Valero at all and he's going to go into the Masters just off the back of the players. But it's unfortunate. This is a great, really, really great Rory golf course. Short grass everywhere, long iron intensive, bomber friendly, all that good stuff. Okay, let's take a quick break and then cannot wait to talk about the modeling here and Scottie Scheffler. A lot of interesting things that came to mind when I ran some numbers from this golf course. But first, let's take a quick ad break and we will be back with some of my early leans and a little early Masters talk as well. Okay, we are back. So running through kind of the top 20 for me, this is pre-Valspar, although a lot of the better players are not playing Valspar. So there will be some movement here based on the Valspar numbers. But Scottie Scheffler, number one. We'll get to Scottie in a bit. I'm gonna table the Scottie stuff and run through my top 20 first. Minwoo Lee, number two. I've been on Minwoo Lee for 3 weeks in a row. Players, Arnold Palmer and Riviera. Arnold Palmer and Riviera, definitely better bets than players. He's never really in the mix. Do I think this is kind of like the perfect scenario for, don't usually bet guys to go back to back, but for a player that I've been on, the way that Minwoo Lee is playing, I think he's a very solid and sound threat to go back to back. Harris English, number three. My guy HE really killed me in DFS at the players. Jake Knapp, number four. I think Knapp is going to be very, very popular. I think this is a great Jake Knapp golf course. He had 5 top 12s to start the season. Kind of a heat check performance at the players where he had a bad miscut at chalk. Will be interesting to see if folks go back to him. I certainly would consider that. Although I haven't been much of a Knapp guy. I never bet the guy. So, and I never really play him all that often in DFS. So, you know, I was on the right side of the players, but I've also missed a lot of the good fortune coming from Knapp earlier in the season. So, I think this is like a perfect golf course for him. And this is probably the best my numbers have ever made him this week. 5, Adam Scott. 6, Rasmus, which is Højgaard, Rasmus Højgaard, which is interesting to me because his brother Nikolai has been better. So I was a little curious to see that Rasmus was popping a little bit more for me. I think that's mainly putting. Rasmus longer term has a much stronger putting baseline than Nikolai. 7, Sam Burns. 8, Jason Day. Kind of starting to see that, like, the fact that I'm not at this golf course making it so ball striking heavy and kind of allowing the possibility that players are going to be able to come in here and separate with their short game and putting, I think is like why kind of the output that I'm getting is a little more amenable to like a Harris English, Jason Day, Sam Burns, who are either elite with their short game or elite putters. Ryan Fox. So Sam Burns, Jason Day, Ryan Fox, who withdrew from the players for some sort of medical concern. So if Ryan Fox was healthy, I think this would be a phenomenal spot for him. But definitely something to monitor with the health. Nikolai Højgaard, 10. I think it's just like both the Højgaards are in the top 10. Let's check on how they are doing this week at the Valspar. Rasmus through 3 rounds, who rates out a little bit better than me. Really struggled on on Saturday. So he might go down, and the putting numbers are going to keep going up. He's gained 6.5 strokes putting, but everything else, particularly the short game, has been horrid. Nikolai, solid approach, but really driving the ball all over the place, which I think is going to be less of a problem at Houston than it was at Valspar. But the short game and putting hasn't been that great for him either. He's T48. So they both made the cut, but have had both shot +3 on Saturday. Not great for either of those two players. That may hurt them in my numbers a little bit. Wyndham Clark, 11. He was a super disappointing miscut for me at Valspar. I might be overrating the Wyndham renaissance just a little bit here. We'll see how much of a drop he has for me after the Valspar. He missed the cut on the number and gained strokes on approach again, lost significantly short game and putting. So I was actually kind of optimistic, and wrong, by the way, that the new caddy on the bag for Wyndham wouldn't be a bad thing. I'm not going to say that the reason why he missed the cut on the number at the Valspar is caddy related, but I thought maybe he would get like a bump on the greens if maybe like his relationship with John Ellis, who had been reading putts for him for a while, had gone stale. Nope. Wyndham still putted like shit this week. And if he had just putted to field average, he would have made the cut pretty easily because he's hitting his irons great at the moment. Harry Hall, elite short game and putter. I think this is a golf course where he can certainly compete and has played well in the past. Ryan Gerard, super interested in Gerard, the way he's been playing. Stefan Jaeger, former champion, very familiar confines for him. Always going to be a good golf course for Jaeger. Sahith Theegala, very disappointing miscut for me at the Valspar. He actually didn't even really come close like Wyndham did, and he was horrendous on approach. Lost 3.6 on approach, 2.2 around the green, 2 putting. That's not great for Sahith. 16, Chris Gotterup, who I think is going to be like a very popular bet in DFS play, just based on the fact that in that PGA Tour mic'd up video, he said, I can't wait to get to Houston because I can drive it all over. My numbers have typically like underrated Gotterup more than they should, causing me to miss out on his 2 wins to start the season. They're potentially, again, underrating him here, but this is like definitely the best course fit that he has rated out for me in as long as I can remember. And it's not as if he's been all that good since winning in Phoenix. He's been okay. Not great at Riviera, not good at the Players, decent at API, but this is definitely the type of golf course that he will be the first to tell you works wonders for him. I think he might be like the 3rd or 4th favorite though. Like it's really interesting to me. Scottie Scheffler is obviously going to be at the top of the odds board, but I would think maybe based on the way he's playing, he's closer to like 4-1 this week or plus 450. And then after that, like, is it Minwoo Lee? Is it Gotterup? You know, is it Sam Burns or like Jake Knapp? I don't think so. It's probably Gotterup or Minwoo Lee, our 2nd or 3rd favorite. So like if Gotterup's sub 20-1 at this event, if Minwoo Lee is sub 20-1 at this event, despite how solidly they rate out from a course fit perspective, probably not sure I want to go there with how much putting can still move this leaderboard. Alex Smalley, one of the few good DFS plays for me at Valspar. Also in my top 20, he's rating out quite well for me. Taylor Pendrith, that's another guy that super, super disappointing for me that I played at the Valspar. He lost 6.3 strokes putting. He just appears to be like completely broken with the putter. And unfortunately, this is a golf course where you're going to need some putting skill. So that's a big concern with Pendrith, despite like, you know, the obvious distance correlation, the fact that he's been so good at Quail Hollow. A couple other guys to keep an eye out for. Tony Finau has been great at this golf course and is starting to play some really good golf. He is T11th heading into the final round at the Valspar, losing 4 strokes off the tee, not driving the ball in the fairway at all. One of the worst in driving accuracy in the field this week. Not going to matter as much at Houston. He's hitting his irons well. He's chipping like crazy, and the putter hasn't been bad either. So I think it's a good spot for Finau to start playing well again. I like Kitayama quite a bit here. Chad Ramey is kind of a under the radar guy that I like quite a bit, but I don't think that there is like, you know, like last week with Rio and Smotherman, those were like the most obvious bets that, you know, we talked about on this podcast, and, you know, they just got destroyed. Like, I bet Rio at 61 on DraftKings on Sunday night. He closed at 22-1 on Bookmaker. One of the biggest nukes I've ever seen in the history of Bookmaker. He's not going to win shit this week. And then Smotherman also, like, we bet at 84. He went all the way down to 40-1. Fucking missed the cut by $1 million. So, you know, having CLV is nice, but didn't help me one bit at Valspar. Although with Fitzpatrick, it did, certainly. Fitzpatrick 20-1. He closed at I think 12-1 on Bookmaker. But the main point is there is not somebody that is jumping out to me in the data that I would tell you when their number gets posted on DraftKings, bet this guy because they're going down, down, down. Like, there's not an obvious candidate for me that week. I have a lot of interest in the Højgaards. I have a lot of interest in Minwoo Lee, although I think he could open very low. I have a lot of interest in Harris English and Jake Knapp as well. And Kurt Kitayama, I like quite a bit. So let's talk about Scheffler really quick, briefly too, because I think that this is a very interesting week for the Scheffler discourse. And I have kind of tried to like stay right-minded on this. I've heard some takes that feel like they are really exaggerating his demise. And I also feel like it's pretty fair at this point to say, like, hey, we've got 4 events where golf courses that in a lot of cases were really fucking good for him. Like, Sawgrass is a really fucking good golf course for Scottie Scheffler. Arnold Palmer is a really fucking good golf course for Scottie Scheffler. He's won both of those events twice, was nowhere near the top of the leaderboard at any point in those 2 tournaments. I think it's pretty fair to say, like, hey, let's talk about what's going on here. And I kind of came on the podcast last week and I said, I played Scottie in DraftKings at the Players. I thought he was going to at least like top 10. He did. And he not only did he not do that, but he also didn't look good to me. And like I said, I think there are a lot of rounds this year where like Scottie looked a lot better than he scored. And I just, at the Players, I just didn't think that he looked that bad. It might've been that his misses felt a little worse. It felt like he wasn't sharp around the green. It felt like the distance control I noticed was quite off for him. And I started to notice that a little bit at the API. Like, he was either coming up short or long a lot more than he normally does. And that's typically a Scottie Scheffler superpower. Like a very good example of this. And I'm not going to say it's distance control. It could be like a club choice miscalculation, although him and Ted Scott are super dialed with him. So I'm probably a little bit more comfortable criticizing the distance control with his irons than I would be saying that he's like making bad decisions on the golf course. But he doubled 18 twice at the API. Uh, and both of those doubles came with a water ball on 18 where he was in the rough and he came up short of the green. And it happened again on Thursday at the Players where I really noticed it, where on the 18th hole, this time he was like clearly a club long on 18 with like a very routine 150-yard shot that he is always so good at hitting to the fat part of the green, hole high. That's like been his superpower. Approach play, middle iron play, long iron play has been his superpower. 2-year sample size. He's the number one player in strokes gain approach from 150 to 200 yards and right up there from 200 yards plus. This year in 2026, in this field, he's 10th in this field in strokes gain approach from 150 to 200 yards. Still very good, but like in this field, Scottie's been number one for the last 2 years. So the guys that in 2026 have gained more strokes on approach than Scottie Scheffler per shot from 150 to 200 yards, Aaron Rai, David Ford, Adam Scott, Mackenzie Hughes, David Lipsky, Will Zalatoris, Kurt Kitayama, Adrian Dumont Deschassar, Ryan Gerard up there. And then you go and look at 200 yards plus. And Scottie Scheffler from 200 yards plus is 91st in average strokes gained per shot. So he just hasn't been hitting he just hasn't been taking advantage of par fives in the way that he normally does. Scoring on hard par fours. I feel like that was a big thing for Scottie Scheffler. That was always so frustrating when you were betting against him, is that he would always find a way to birdie the really hard hole that you were really hoping that most other guys would get a par on, and he would birdie that hole. And a lot of those long par fours and those par fives, he's just not scoring on them because he's not gaining a lot of strokes on approach from 200 yards plus. And now I guess the positive that I would say about Scottie Scheffler is a lot of things about Memorial Park that are working in Scottie's favor. We said that about Sawgrass. We said that about API, but still a couple of things to note. He's finished second here the last 2 years. It's in Texas. He's played this event 5 years in a row. He even played it when it was part of the fall swing. He's been phenomenal on golf courses with a lot of short grass around the greens. Augusta, Quail Hollow. He won the PGA, kind of the two main comp courses that I have here, Augusta and Quail Hollow. Scheffler's been unbelievable at. Okay. And even if his approach play isn't completely dialed, this is a golf course where, you can make up for it with really good short game and really good lag putting. And this year, Scottie Scheffler has been a better chipper and a better putter than he has been an approach player. And this is a golf course where, putting and short game can mask some approach flaws. Okay. So there are a lot of things working in Scottie Scheffler's favor for this to be the get right spot for him, where he kind of says, guys, don't worry about me. I'm still the favorite of the Masters. I'm ready to go. Let's win our third green jacket. if Scottie Scheffler doesn't play well this week, and I'm sorry, my standards are a bit higher with him. When I say doesn't play well, that means like he's not contending, like I don't care if he finishes T24 at the price that he's going to be playing Scottie Scheffler in DFS and him finishing T24. You're not in a good position to win money that way. Trust me, I've experienced it. So like when I say if he doesn't play well this week, playing well for me is like he needs to seriously contend. And if he does not do that, I think it's going to be a really fascinating Masters because it feels already a lot more wide open than it did to enter the year. At the beginning of the year, I said statistically, it feels like the major that Scottie is most likely to win by far is the Masters, based on the way that golf course sets up for him compared to the other golf courses. Obviously, he's not at the level that he was as a player that you would feel confident in to win a major right now, heading into the Masters in 2 weeks. There's some questions about Rory McIlroy right now with his injury. Obviously, added on the fact that I'm not going to count him out, but I think it's very fair to point out that players defending their green jacket have not fared as well. It's been a very difficult tournament to win in back-to-back years. In fact, it's been a pretty often a difficult tournament to even contend the year after winning a green jacket. So you have that narrative that's kind of working against Rory. You have the narrative that there are chinks in Scottie Scheffler's armor. And I think like that is going to be revved up to 1,000 if Scottie Scheffler doesn't play well in Houston. There's already been a lot of what's wrong with Scottie Scheffler talk. Some of it I feel like is a bit overblown. Some of it I feel like is really fair. And so if he doesn't win Houston, like for example, or excuse me, if he doesn't even play well in Houston, you look at the DraftKings pricing that's already out. Talked about this a little bit on the Monday show. Scottie Scheffler is $14,000. The Masters, the bottom of the Masters field, like the players in the 6K range, a lot of guys you're not going to want to play. You're not going to want to play a VJ Singh or a Freddie Couples. And some of the guys that are playing really well right now that I think are going to be popular Masters bets, popular Masters picks, players like John Rahm, who's like gaining a zillion strokes on approach and live, seeing him be a popular Masters bet already, and Colin Morikawa. Those guys are $4,000 cheaper than Scottie Scheffler and DraftKings. $4,000 cheaper. Okay, so for the same amount of money, you could play Colin Morikawa and John Rahm, or you could play Scottie Scheffler and VJ Singh. Maybe Tiger Woods. I have to double check on that math, but for the price that you get building balanced in this field versus playing Scottie Scheffler at the top, it's a really big price to play for DFS players in a year where DFS players that have been playing Scheffler haven't been winning as much money outside of the Amex. We kind of go over the lineups every single week. The last 3 events, like Scottie Scheffler lineups have not been at the top of the big contests that he's played. He's been priced higher this year. It's been harder to get in good players in your 6-person DraftKings lineups. If you're playing Scottie Scheffler, there's been a lot more of a tax on playing Scottie Scheffler, and his results haven't been as good as I think a lot of people were hoping for as well. So, I wonder what that's going to do to his ownership heading into Augusta. Cause obviously if, Scottie Scheffler is low owned, then kind of there's a buyback discourse that I'd be interested in exploring as well. But at the moment, um, it's just I'm just really interested to watch him this week and see if we can glean a little bit more information on where his game is at heading into the Masters, because Scottie Scheffler is the impact of the way that Scottie Scheffler plays is going to impact like the discourse, the narrative, the odds board the most. Um, and some of that may be overreactions. Some of it I may be underreacting to. Um, we'll see. But as it stands now, we'll talk about the Masters more and more in the next couple of weeks. Really excited for a couple podcasts that we've got coming up on the Masters as we start to like whittle down the guys that I have the most interest in betting. But um, it's going to be an awesome couple of weeks heading into the Masters. So thank you very much, as always, for listening to this podcast. I hope it helped. Hop into Discord. We got a lot going on with all of the tennis stuff. Rishi, just another casual 10K in tennis today. Obviously running out of adjectives to describe how strong he's been in our tennis streets. And he's obviously doing some great work in March Madness as well. I don't know how he finds these Vegas guys that he forms relationships and always hit tons of bets for us. But if you want a place to sweat the golf the next couple of weeks and the March Madness, we would love to have you at Inside Sports Network. Feel free to reach out on Twitter or DM me on Discord if you have any questions or anything. And thank you for supporting the free shows as well. Like on YouTube and share on Twitter if this helped you out as well. Goes a very long way, especially in these weeks heading into the Masters. So appreciate the support a lot. Hopefully we can get another one over the finish line with Fitzpatrick. And if not, enjoy the golf tomorrow, enjoy the college basketball, and we will be back on this podcast feed on Monday to talk about the Houston DFS slate. Cheers.